Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. It's me, Tigria Gardenia. I love Layton. That's it. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it right from the beginning. I love Layton Fulton. I have had multiple conversations with him now, and every conversation is pure gold. Pure gold. You are going to love this episode so much because if there is ever a person who represents the everyday and who does it in such a beautiful, shining way, it is Layton Fulton. I'm telling you, I can't sing his praises enough because I just, I love how Layton has taken everyday life and turned it into wisdom. Yeah, it's beautiful. There are so many things that I could say, but instead, I'm just going to let Layton speak for himself because it comes across. And so this episode is so special. It's episode 119, Remembering What It Means to Be Human with Layton Fulton. I mean, seriously, just from that title alone, doesn't that tell you that this is going to be a great conversation? I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Welcome to Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigria Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Naturally Conscious community. For over a decade, I've been known as a world ambassador for plant advocacy, working closely with plants to share their practical wisdom to help you consciously embody the elements of life that nourish your evolution. In this podcast, I delve into ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways of plants. Together, we'll explore how ecosystem thinking helps you overcome limiting beliefs, understand the true nature of relationships, and live an authentic, impactful life. Layton, you are one of those surprises that I love so much because we were like, when we went had our pre-interview, it was kind of like, I don't know where this is going to go. And in the end, it ended up going to an amazing place. So to get us started, can you tell everybody who is Layton?
Oh, well, that might be a bit of a struggle. I'm still on that path of finding out who that guy is myself, truth be told. But I am, I guess, a distinct individual here that has been exploring human consciousness, has been I don't want to say that it's been a goal, but it's been a very rewarding journey over the last 4 or 5 years. I've really been leaning into the human consciousness, the David Hawkins of the world, the Thomas Campbells, the Alan Wattses are big influences of mine that I've been reading. And of course, as you know, and we spoke before, vibration and frequency is such a big thing. And that's kind of, I feel, what brought us together with the plants. I work in psychedelic medicine, psilocybin specifically, hypnotherapy, which is dealing with the unconscious mind and dealing with what your body is telling you, what your nervous system is telling you. And a lot of the times I seem to end up in that intersection where vibration and frequency comes to tell you where your body is and what your nervous system is trying to tell you. And I have found that I'm an individual. I don't know if I agree with that word or not, but someone who is connected to everything, and I think we all are. And the plant,
Where I'm from, I was just going to say, where I'm from, the individual is made out of 5 people, whatever kind of people, human people, non-human people, but 5 people make up an individual. So in that way, you are an individual.
So a distinct individual who has found his way into human consciousness, via plants. And I'm just still continuing to explore that. And in a lot of my time I spend helping other people, find a spot where they can kind of enter into that realm of exploring themselves, I guess. So that was a very roundabout answer. But yeah.
I love it. Well, and one of the things I love is, so I'm always, I have to admit, I'm very cautious when I meet people who come from the world of psychedelics, because unfortunately, I've had both kinds of experiences. I've had the most beautiful experiences that come from a place of deep connection and reverence. We've had a few people already on the show that have been just beautiful in the relationship that they have with these beings and the work that they do, even when they're not ingesting, but just like that relationship. And then, of course, I've had people who have reached out to me who want to be on the podcast because they're like, oh, I do plant medicine. And it's not it's not the same thing. Yes, you're having a wonderful experience, but your relationship just isn't there. And for me, that's really what the core of this show is. But one of the things that stood out to me when we had our first, our little pre-interview was I feel like life set you up in a direction that you didn't even recognize until way later on. And so, can you tell people a little bit about how you grew up?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I love to reflect on my youth, truth be told. I speak a lot, not only in my work with the clinic, but and when I do these podcasts and when I speak with people. I was so fortunate to have an amazing group of mentors. When I was growing up, we spoke about, I grew up on a farm in a rural area in southern Alberta, Canada. And I had a grandfather that lived literally on the other side of the fence from, we lived in a trailer, they lived in the farmhouse on the home quarter. And I was lucky enough to grow up around horses and cattle and cats and dogs and all your typical farm creatures, with a garden, a huge garden that the whole family spent the time weeding. I'm going to say the whole family. If my mom hears this, she's going to correct me on that. My mom and my grandma worked really hard in the garden. And I preface that because, in my growing up, I realized, and was taught by my grandfather and my parents, uh, the importance of the animals that you raise and the frequency and how you raise them with love is just as important when you do it with your plants in your garden. And you're I'm sure anyone who's ever had a plant that looks sad in the living room and you come up and like, what's wrong, little buddy? Like, I'm doing this, I put you in the sunlight, I did this, I did that. You talk to them. It's no different than talking to the milk cow in the morning, like, hey Bess, what's up? When you run your hand down her back and you treat everybody with love and respect. And that really, it makes a difference in the world. It makes a difference in how that animal heals. It makes a difference in how that animal grows up, and it's no different than when you're doing it in the garden. So my youth was that, learning respect for everything, learning that what you give is what you get. And that continued on for my entire life. I ended up working in the trades when I was at a young age, coming off the farm, working as a welder in a big shop, or not a big shop, but a local farm shop. And that mentorship continued. That when you put effort and you put love into your work, regardless of what it is, you get that back, and your end product shows that. And I say that because, whether you're building the Texas gate or you're fixing somebody's truck deck or their trailer, you put a lot of effort in it, you put a lot of love into it, and you get this great end result. And that was taught to me from day one, when you're in the garden or you're raising an animal or you're butchering an animal or whatever it is that you're doing.
And I think that this style, this way of growing up changes everything because, as you just said it's not about somebody, quote unquote, like telling you to be respectful or telling you to do X, Y, and Z. You do it because you've lived it. You know it's the right thing to do. You see the return from that. You see that return in the way that the animal or the plant reacts. You see it in the way that you feel. You see it in the way that the harmony of the land around you. It doesn't mean hard times don't come and challenges don't come. And it doesn't mean that there aren't moments where you're like, okay, what's the right thing to do? But in general, it orients you into that connection and that relationship that I think naturally then you look to that relationship when you need help or when you need support or when you're looking for answers. And it's like a compass. It orients you in a certain way that makes all the rest, like you said, you went into welding, you went into the trades, you were working, these other jobs, and yet that philosophy, that relationship to the natural world remains. And I can't emphasize how much I feel as I talk to more and more people that the happiest people, the people that really find themselves and find their direction and their calling, come from that type of way of looking at the world. Those small kind of reminders that we're all connected, and therefore we all want to be loved, we all want to be supported, and we all want to be respected in whomever it is that we are. And so I'm curious on that front is, at what point do you think you actually, this is a weird question, but I guess I'm saying, like, at what point do you feel like you realized it? You were like, oh my goodness, this is really a different way of living. Like, this is a different way of being in this world.
Mm. You know, I was just thinking as you were talking, for surely, I have always felt that coming back to the farm is my baseline. That's my,
Hmm.
your reset. I worked all over Western Canada and up in the Northwest Territories and all over the place doing construction. I was very fortunate, at a great career in that. But when you get tired and you get exhausted, and a lot of the times you'd be in work camps where there's just, they have a big communal kitchen, or if you were working in a city, you were eating at a restaurant. And I'm saying this specifically because there was absolutely nothing better than when you were exhausted, when you were tired, you come home to the farm and you eat food out of the garden, and you eat some local, butchered meat that was raised, here, with no preservatives and no vaccines, and none of anything external. And you, as soon as you were done, as soon as you were sitting, you get here and you breathe the fresh air and the birds. My kids used to love to come to the farm. They'd be like, food just tastes better and the birds just sound louder, and just, everything. And so I realized that, I would say, typical teenager, I blew right through that. You don't appreciate stuff at that age. It doesn't seem so. It was in my 20s.
Right.
I left the farm at a young age to go to work and go work all over the place. And then in my mid 20s, I remember, coming back and being like, this is a reset. This is what makes you feel better. It doesn't matter even if you're eating at a good restaurant, or if you're, working in a nice environment, but you'd come back here and be like, oh yeah. Oh yeah, and that was in my mid 20s. About the same time I started pulling my parents aside, and coming back and being like, "So, about all that stuff we talked about when I was 18, 19, 17. I see what you were saying now. I understand. Thank you for all that. I didn't get it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm getting it now." It was around that same time that things really started flooding in, that, oh, yeah, there's something to this for sure. So that's a great question. Yeah.
I know exactly how you feel. I've had that same conversation with my mother, not specifically around like the nature element, because that's a different aspect, but about so many other things where I'm like, okay, I see it now. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for not giving up on me and going in that direction. So on that front, you mentioned something that I think for some people, I know that for people often question this in me, which is, every once in a while, actually, I had somebody who contacted me about being a podcast guest. And one of the questions he asked, he's like, because he was referred to me by somebody else, by one of my listeners. And he contacts me, he goes, but before we have the pre-interview, are you looking for vegetarians? Because I'm not a vegetarian. And I was like, I talk about plant intelligence. Do you think that I would be a vegetarian, like where I only eat plants? He's like, well, a lot of them are. I'm like, they are, but you mentioned something in a way that is very similar to the way I think about it, but I'd love to expand on it, which is, you talked about, butchering, and I've also had the immense honor, because to me, it's an honor to be able to butcher an animal. It's like you're entering into another level of relationship where this being is giving you, and I know some people will say this doesn't exist, but I have felt that permission, like that acceptance, that understanding that this is part of the cycle of life, and that this is where we are right now, probably because it doesn't come from a place of greed or of overeating, but it comes from like feeding an entire family of people in a shared house that respect these types of cycles and of relationships. And so I'm curious as to, how do you feel about, you eat animals, you eat plants, and yet you raise all of them, like you said. First of all, is there a difference for you between the animals and the plants? And then also, how, what is your philosophical view that's made you feel comfortable saying, you know what, I feel good, being able to eating these beings that have given their lives for this because whatever. How did you come to that?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a big one. Um, Again, I'm going to speak a lot about my grandfather in this. Coming back to it,
Yeah,
obviously
fair.
it'll be very apparent he was a huge influence in my life. And and then now I was never a hunter growing up. I grew up on the farm. I wasn't too heavily involved. We did a lot of the branding and so on and so forth. But my grandpa and my dad were the individuals that took care of the animals, and then we didn't have a lot of animals when I was in my late teens, when I was the kind of age that I could have been involved with. We took the animals to a local butcher. There was a lot of tradesies that went on, in small town communities. So I wasn't involved in that too
Right.
much. And then as I got older, I had buddies that used to hunt. And fortunately, they grew up in similar type environments in northern Manitoba or southern Saskatchewan. And I wanted to learn how to hunt because I thought I like skills. I like to learn things and I like skills. So I started learning not with my father. My father hunted all the time when he was growing up. They lived in a very barren area that's how you survived. That they raised meat and animals to sell to survive on the ranch, and they shot deer wildly for the family to survive on. So my dad was kind of I grew up doing this. I'm going to enjoy the fruits of my labor, and we're going support the local butcher. And he explored they have their own story. They were doing other things. And so I grew up with these guys, and this, I'm talking about 19, 20, 21 years old. And I'd asked these friends of mine, like, would you guys teach me how to hunt? I've got a gun, I've got everything. My grandpa's got me all set up with this, my grandpa and my dad, but I don't know how to skin anything. I don't know how to properly butcher. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to do this. So these guys were teaching me how to do it. And they had learned from their dad, who learned from their grandpa. And it was a very respectful thing. Like, you don't need to shoot something with the big rack, but also they hunted in a respectful area that they did shoot some of the bigger elk when we go elk hunting, because they were not going to make another year. Yes, they make a nice trophy, but it also is to do with culling the herd and keeping things proper in the world. And they explained all of these things to me, that we're going to shoot something for meat, so we don't just shoot this, and we shoot something that is going to be a good animal to take the hide from. And they were very nose to tail. Like, they'd make their sausage and their pepperoni and use the spleen and use the lungs and use. So I was, again,
Right.
this is going to be a common thing. I was very fortunate that these were the guys who were teaching me, because if I had somebody that just shot it and busted the rack off of it and cut the loins off the back and said, okay, this is what we do. Now we go back to town shooting off their mirror. These weren't the guys that, the like you said, the world seems to have set me up to have all these great mentors and all these great people. So, they very much taught me that this is the type of animal that you pick. This is where you do it. This is how we do it. We took everything out with us. We didn't leave a mess. We'd leave some of the stuff that the local animals, the wolves, or depending on where we're hunting, the coyotes could eat, because, that's the circle of life. That's how things go. But there was no waste. And then, I learned how to skin and do things properly. And I so firmly believe that vibration, shows up in the things that you eat. I like fast food, that the way that those types of things have been processed and worked through, and whether it's a salad, and whether it is, factory farming to where people get their eggs, or anything. I think that vibration, you take it in. My grandpa, again, I can't stop saying that. He used to always say, if you chase an animal down with a vehicle, and I know this sounds terrible, but if that animal is stressed out and hasn't been respected, you're going to put all those stress chemicals, all those hormones, and all that energy, and that bad energy. That's what you're ingesting, and you don't want to put that stuff in your body. What you put in your body is very important. You wouldn't eat something out of the garden that's got DDT sprayed all over it, now that we know better and we know what these chemicals. And so, our garden was always chemical free, and there was no fertilizers in there other than what we cleaned out of the feedlot, and tilled in the fall before, and our compost and everything like that. So whatever this comes back to what you're putting into your body. So I was just very, very fortunate to learn from people that, had learned even from indigenous individuals, that there's a lot of those in the area, that, this is important, and this is how you respect it, and this is how you treat it, and that's what you're going to put into your body. And that's where the importance of that came from, I guess, if that answers your question. And, again, that
Yeah,
spreads right to the
it
garden,
does. And
that, it just put in.
yeah, and I would add a different one extra element to it that I think at least I've finally have realized it only now, only at this age. So I think there's a combination of what you're offered, in the sense that what is it that life provides for you, in the sense of, for you, your grandpa, like for others it might be another opportunity. For example, I didn't grow up that way. I never had any of that type of, I grew up in the city. I grew up with restaurants and supermarkets. Like, yes, when I went to live on my own, I did go down the organic route and the whole, like, what you put in your body from as best as you can, from still buying, rather than buying from the big chain supermarkets. Let's go to the co-op, let's go to the farmers market. So I went down that route, and that was afforded to me because, I moved to a location that had a lot of that, and so I became part of that culture. But I do think, and you said it, and I guess sometimes, we don't recognize things unless somebody mirrors it back to us. As I'm listening to you, I'm realizing that also you took it and ran with it, in the sense that, like you said, in your teenage years, you didn't recognize any of this, the importance of it, why it's there. But then there came a point in your life where you made a conscious choice to not go ask, like, the neighborhood trophy hunters, but instead to go and find the people who were like, no, these are the types of people that are doing it. They're doing it in a way that is, if I'm going to go take a life, I want to do it with this level of respect. I want to do it with this level of care for the animal, for, like you said, the cycle of life. Like, it just the same as the garden, right? If I'm going to take from the garden, I'm going to create a plot that is the size, that has the right mix of diversity, so that these plants are living a good life. They're living a good life, and I am part of that cycle of life, right? So like you said, sometimes you hunt to cull, to keep the numbers in check. And also, that is because we are nature, right? So that is part of our role. Just the same as, lions keep gazelles in check, and like mistletoe will keep certain types of trees also in check as a parasite. We as humans also have the opportunity to do it. Our problem is that we go then, like you said, towards trophies and greed and fear and all these extra things that end up then disturbing the balance. But I do think that there's one part: what does life offer you? What is like afforded to you? And then the other part is, what do I do with that? And what do I do with that? Where does that take you? Because, for example, it wasn't until I started working closely with plants that I was given opportunities to be more in the garden, to butcher an animal myself, to, for example, have animals at home that we would raise and that then we would slaughter once a year. Like, I had to, I sure that had to attract that opportunity. And I felt like when it was offered to me, I could have walked away and been like, no, 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 I don't do that. And I was the opposite. I was like, you know what? I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. Because if I'm going to eat these plants, if I'm going to eat these animals, I need to know what it's like. And I need to know what it's like to take that life in this relationship. I need to do the ritual to make sure that the plants or the animal and I are in synchronicity. And then I need to make sure that once we're harmonized, I'm looking in this straight in the eyes, and I'm saying, and I'm feeling for a response, like, yes, this is an okay to think. And I think that a lot of hunters do say that, right? That they have that split second where it's almost as if the animal knows, and they're like, there's like a moment of click. Okay, this is going to happen right now. And I see it here because we have a lot of wild boar. So we have a lot of wild boar hunters, and I've seen both sides of the fence. The kind that, like you said, like their grandparents taught them and everything that happens. And then those that are extremely disrespectful, and you're just sitting there going, why? Like that, let's keep you off our property, because that's not exactly what we want. And we don't want that kind of energy in it. But I do think that there is I get offered something, and then if I choose to go towards a path of evolution, I take that and I then multiply it by attracting what it is that I need in order to live that lifestyle and to be able to live in that authentic kind of response. I don't even know if I made any sense with that. Hopefully
Yeah,
it did.
yeah, it did. I lived in a city about 3 hours from here for 17 or 18 years when my kids were young. That's kind of where we ended up, settling, and I worked out of there. And I didn't put the effort in to live the type of life that I lead now. In that, there were some great butcher shops there and everything, but I didn't. I just got my meat from wherever I could buy it from, or from a buddy that I could, and or vegetables, same as well. I shopped at the supermarket. Couldn't always make the farmers market, and so on and so forth. And I mean, I didn't wreck anything, but I did really notice that when I had the opportunity to get out of the city. Now, when I did move back I live back right beside the farm now. Bought a place back around here, and I did really notice when I moved back here that, I was out of my nervous system was out of whack. It was not regulated. It is not like it is when I am here now. And, I just look back at that. And I'm like, there was nothing wrong with it. Like, I'd have never known the difference had I not moved back here. But it very much
Right.
came back into sync when I moved here and started planting trees. I had kind of a barren line, and there's wind down here, and I live in the prairies, so I started planting trees. And then you catch yourself and being like, oh yeah, here I am back here, with my fingers in the dirt. And what a noticeable difference. And that kind of started me asking other questions about other things, about the employment that I had taken back on, about my nervous system in general. And I'm like, how come this is so much more? My shoulders just drop, and this is me here now. So what else is out of alignment? And I guess that's the best way I can put it. What else
Mhm.
is out of alignment? What else? And I really started listening to my body again, and getting intrigued by things and getting curious about stuff. It's just like, this never used to bother me. And now that I'm back here, it seems to, where in my body is it agitating me? Where in my nervous system am I at? And taking the time to sit with that. And that kind of is what started me back to finding myself again. As cheesy or cliche as that might sound, moving back here got me back on that path that, man, I once was and I want to be again. So what other small minute changes do I need to make in my external conscious world to get back to where I was and where I want to be, for that matter?
I have to do a little aside about the whole cliche because so I'm somebody who tends to avoid cliches. Like I'm like, oh no, I don't want to. I don't want to be a cliche. I want to be unique and original. And a few years back, I was with in Dom and Her, we have these spiritual research groups that we pick topics and we research them for a year. And sometimes the group keeps going year after year. And I was in this wonderful group that was all connected to the plants. And each one of us was doing research. I was doing research into understanding like the subtle body of imagination, working very closely with a little plant that's right behind me for those that are watching the video. And anyway, so we were each doing research. One was working with an avocado, one was working with a ficus, one was working, each one of us working with our plants. And in the end, I'm here thinking, we're going to end up in this massive revelation, each one of us kind of approaching things in different ways. Oh my goodness. The last meeting that we had as we were writing up our thesis and we were trying to like, culminate all of what we had researched over the year and what we had studied and understood, it all came back to unconditional love. And I was like, oh my God, it's like kumbaya, like unconditional love. And I was just like, I was expecting, big words of insights of, oh, the answers of the universe. And in the end, we did get them. But the freaking answer to the universe is just unconditional love. And I was just sitting there, like both disappointed at first, because I was like, what the hell? And then like the penny dropped and all of a sudden I understood. I was like, it's not about finding some fancy, words, and it's not a dissertation from a university where you have to get points by how big the word that you put into it is. It really is about that. It's about, like you said, that self love, that understanding my body and having complete unconditional love and listening to myself. And then having that unconditional love, which, in my opinion, when you do get there, that's the curiosity, the awe, the wonder, the like, why is that happening? Where is that coming from? Even if it's something that seems horrible, but instead of being mad at it, you're like, I wonder why I'm feeling that thing. Like, what the heck? And then you go down that rabbit hole that helps you understand it. So, on that note, I'm so curious how you ended up at, psilocybin. Like where does that come into this whole big picture?
Yeah, we're creeping up on the TSN turning point now, I guess you could say. But yeah, so in
I love it.
yeah, yeah. So I won't tell the whole story again, but again, the moving back to where I grew up and moving back to my acreage and just having time. By this time, my kids had grown up and moved on to be the successful, beautiful people that I am so proud to say are part of my family. And they had moved on, and I had the time to, again, back to planting trees and doing stuff and being on the farm. And I started kind of being regulated and exploring, just like you had spoke. Why am I feeling this way? Why is this off? Why and having the time to not, bustling kids around to help make sure the kids are at work, helping my son fix his car, getting my daughter to cheer, and go into jujitsu and taekwondo lessons and so on and so forth. I really had the time to sit and be like, why does this bother me so much? Why is this, the thing, and where is it? So I started getting back, and I kind of dropped off my fitness regime for a bit. So my sister lives back here. She's a trainer and a yoga instructor and so on and so forth. And so I started hiking with and exercising with her and really working on my physical body, in which, when you feel good and your body feels good and you take the time for yourself and you invest in yourself, you start, noticing things. And of course, my eating was nice and clean, moving back to the farm, eating asparagus out of the ditch and just eating local stuff sourced from my buddies' farms and so on and so forth. So anyway, I'm back in alignment or on my way and feeling like, and I started reading again, which is something that had kind of fallen off the map. And like I'd mentioned before, I'm a big Alan Watts fan. He's the older version of a George Carlin. I feel like, they point out all these obvious things, speak about them, and make you laugh.
You just dated us. You dated us so much.
I think my hairline dates me, so it doesn't matter to me. That's okay. So it started.
I actually saw one of George Carlin's final performances.
Oh,
So it was great.
I
Go
love
ahead.
him, and I,
Love him.
yeah, I do. And he was like, it was a person that just pointed things out that made you laugh, that were just so clearly out there. So I started reading again, and then I got into some reading that wasn't really up my alley. Like David Hawkins, I had mentioned again. He speaks a lot about consciousness and vibration, and he talks about how you build an ecosystem, how it kind of starts at the base vibration. And so I started reading about this type of stuff. And I met a woman that I'm still involved with, and we started, we had very similar reading interests, and she had ended up finding a clinic that was offering hypnotherapy, like training, I guess. It was like a cohort. He was like, hey, I've been doing this for however many years. Clinic's coming up on 10 years. I'm thinking about maybe expanding if there's any interest in this. We connected with this fellow, really hit it off with him, very much on the same, mindset. And so we took this course, and with this, as we started exploring consciousness and so on and so forth, psilocybin just kind of fell into it. When you're grounded and you're looking, came to us as an invitation to, this is what's available. This can put a wedge in the door and open up as to what's available to you. And I am going to preface this with, I am, again, a cliche. I had an experience with mushrooms when I was in my 20s, set and setting. Neither one of them were good. I had a bad experience. It was like, nope, I'm good. I don't need to do that ever again. So fast forward to 25 years later, and I had felt this calling.
Oh my goodness, I really want to hear about this. But before we go there, let me share with you one of our eco conscious business partners. The first time I connected with a plant and actually received a response, I got chills. It's such an invigorating sensation when you make a breakthrough like that and realize just how connected we are and that we are nature. As a nature inspired mentor myself, I was super excited to stumble upon the Shift Network and its mission to empower a global network of evolutionary change agents. Talk about my kind of movement. There are so many inspiring thought leaders, healers, empaths, and other visionaries all under one roof, each one on an individual and collective mission to help you reawaken and co create a just and prosperous world. Check out the show notes and click on the link to learn more about the Shift Network. Consider enrolling in a course or two. Their programs are the perfect complement to your evolving, naturally conscious life.
We're both into the same things, and so we continued our reading and meditation and exercise and everything. Life was good, and we ran into a fellow that was teaching the hypnotherapy course, and we decided, hey, this is something that is interesting for both of us. It's a lot of personal development. It dives right into the unconscious mind, and that's where I was at and looking to explore more. So we decided, this is something we can do individually and together, and it's going to be super fun. So we were doing it, and it led us down all sorts of, reading and exploring the unconscious mind. We got our certification for hypnotherapy, which has been amazing. And in doing that, we started working with individuals, grounding, to get yourself grounded. Anyone that's gone into any type of an experience or even a business meeting, you want to go in with an intention. A grounded intention is that this is why I'm going in to discuss this. I'm going in to deal with that. So
Right.
after, I had an experience with psilocybin when I was in my early 20s, horrible setting, again, the cliche textbook. Yeah, I don't need to ever do that again. So fast forward 25 years, and I was nervous, and I'm like, but you know what? For whatever reason, I feel like now I'm asking, and this keeps presenting itself. So with an experienced sitter, after a hypnotherapy session, about a week before, I was very grounded and going in with the intention of, what is this itch? What is this that I'm looking for? I was at the stage where I was reading all the books. I was chasing, I want to know the answer. What is the point of this? What is the point of everything? Why this? Why that? I had all these questions. So I went in with the, what is the point? Show me what's available to us. And so I did this big journey with sound therapy as well. So again, back to vibration and frequency. Sound is very important. And so I do this big breakthrough journey, and I was so clearly shown. I had, again, I'm asking, show it to me, give it to me, show me the consciousness. I want all this. And I was so clearly at one point shown by the medicine, it's all available to you if you want it. It's all right here. But the entire point of being here is to be human and to just be. So you should work on that. You should just be and learn your surroundings, learn what being human is, what being fully human is. That's the point. And right then and there, I just, it's, it was just a big switch. It's like, yeah, I just need to idle down and just be. And I haven't done the medicine since. That was 3 years ago, I think it was. I don't believe it's something that you need to do continually, continually, continually. I think it is an amazing partner that can be utilized with, intelligent conversations like this with like-minded people and intelligent people like yourself that can offer, hey, here's my experience. And I really think that's it was came into my path to show me that there, it's not about escapism. It's not about, people want to ascend, want to ascend, want to ascend. Well, we're here. Like, let's be human. Let's, again, back to what you so eloquently put, let's sit in these emotions. Let's wonder why our body is bringing this feeling forward to us, and, and sit in it and explore what being human is. And being human, I think in huge part is, being in homeostasis, being in being one with everything else that is. We're all connected. Everything is connected. That was something that was clearly shown to me by the medicine as well, is that, and that's reported in so many different journeys, whether it's iboga or ayahuasca or plant medicine, or even people that smoke weed all the time, talk about feeling part of something bigger, feeling connected. And that, kept bringing itself into every aspect of what I was looking for. So now I am comfortable in sitting with that, to realize that, I'm connected to all this stuff, and it brings itself up in my day-to-day life, in the garden when I'm planting a tree. If nothing else, it makes me curious as to, what's this all about? And I used to get not overwhelmed by it, but want to go down the path, just like you said, read all the books and write about this and do all that and have all the conversations. Whereas now I can comfortably believe when I'm putting a tree in the ground and making sure that not too much oxygen gets on the roots and packing it properly and making sure everything's got water. I'm just like, isn't this interesting? What this is amazing that this is just happening. You put something in the ground, you put water on it, and how am I connected to this? And how does your energy different? And it just makes me smile all the time now. So, that was a very interesting experience that I'd have never guessed. 10 year ago me would have been, huh? But it's just when something calls, there's a reason.
I am so in love with every word you just said. You can't even imagine it, because I feel like you have touched on what I call the essence of plantness, which is the being part, and that the true understanding of what it means to be human is knowing and feeling super comfortable with when to act through our animalness, when to be through our plantness, when to, and all these other pieces. And it's about, it's only in the stillness of that presence, of that, like, I am going to be fully present to whatever the experience is. And I'm going to, and I love that you had such an open-ended question, which is, okay, what is the experience that I'm here for? Like, what is it that I'm supposed to be learning in this? What is it that I need next? Like, what is that piece? And that, the answer was about learning what it means to be human. And I think that's such a beautiful kind of segue from some of the previous guests that I've had, that we've been putting together this kind of understanding, weaving through together all this understanding of, we live in this disconnection, right? This disconnection to our true nature, to the fact that we are nature. And then fast forward into learning what it means to be human is learning that we are nature, that we are connected, that I can just be in the moment, and that is also part. It's also all the other elements that you brought about before, right? My interaction with the animals and with other humans, my interaction with plants, my ability to be in my body and to really feel my body. And I also would say, so recently, personally, I'm doing this work of trying to understand, what does it mean? Like, what is the what does femininity really mean from as an energy force? Like, what is the feminine? And I'm starting to realize that the feminine is about that care, and that we have kind of labeled it as all these other things, but it really is about that care. And so, whether or not you're, how to care for self, how to care for others, how to care in a way that is healthy. And also from an energetic and, like, from a Kabbalistic perspective, the feminine is the severe one. Justice is carried out by a feminine sword, right? So the care is also, I have to punish you, or I have to, wield that sort of justice, whether it's for protection of my of the those around me, or protection of the greater good. And I feel like all of these different elements, as you said, the natural world has a much better take on, right? Like, yes, a forest is also a war zone, but not a war zone because I want to grow big and take up all the space and I want to hog up all the resources, but a war zone because, hey, I need to keep you in check, because if you go out of bounds, and then I need to do this thing, and then you need to do this thing. And so there's like this kind of reciprocal warring. And we see this in the plant world. I mean, we see this on the animal world as well. Like, two rams or two deer or whatever are not going to continuously fight. They're only going to fight when it's necessary, until whatever needs to get resolved, and then they'll go about their merry way. And I think that learning what it's like to be human is such is about stepping into all of these natural rhythms and taking away all the conditioned responses we have that says, oh, when you do that, that's wrong, or when you do this, it's wrong. It's like, no, it's like, let me find the context in which this, even if it's harsh or severe or whatever it is the right thing to do. It's not coming from a place of like egotism, like egoism or whatever. It's coming from, this is the right thing to do. This is what the ecosystem needs. And this is what my consciousness requires for me to be in that state of, evolution and of beingness with everything else around me. Okay, I just went really philosophical, but it's like so there in my body. It's
No,
like I'm looking for all the right words to put it together.
no, it's awesome because it is, the you don't need a book or you don't need an instructor to tell you what's right or wrong. If you are being present, when you have
Exactly.
your hands on something, when you're about to do something, you know what right or wrong is. There doesn't need to be. That's intuition. And I can get very philosophical as
I would
well.
say that that's connection.
Yeah, right. And it's a remembering. It's not so much that you're moving forward or you're evolving into something. You're remembering like, oh yeah, I'm capable of. I actually had all this intuition. I had all of this humanity or whatever word you want to build for that. I had all that when I got here and I lost it, chasing this or chasing that, or my ego pushed it out of the way or whatever it was, whatever anybody's story is, and it's a remembering. You're like, oh yeah, I can remember because we've spoke before. Now, I was on the farm, I grew up here, I left, I came back, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a remembering. It's no different when you can feel that intuition, when you can, and, people might want to get off, because I worked in the corporate world, I worked in construction, I worked in the corporate world, I worked downtown, I worked in offices, at a managerial and a supervisory level, and, people could say, oh, that's all woo woo, that's all this, that's all that, but if you can get connected and remember what you're capable of as a human, you can leverage that in all parts of your life. I mean, anybody that's ever been in a boardroom with a
Exactly.
bunch of people talking and one person says something and you can see the whole room go, ooh, well, how is that any different than being able to be in tune to your surroundings in nature? You can, the whole room can be like, ooh, Joe, we know we don't say that. So like the energy of the room changes. So how is that any different? You can be tuned
Hmm.
into it in that. And, there is a lot of stigma, when it comes to the blue collar and the white collar, that a lot of this stuff is, again, I'll use that term woo woo, but if you want to forget that, you're doing yourself a disservice. That, again, being fully human is being able to be in
Exactly.
tune with your body, feel it, feel other people's energy. Everybody knows what it's like, but you push it away or you write it off as something else, something that isn't. But you know, and this comes back to me stammering as to saying I'm an individual because the when you're outside, when you connect to your intuition, when you are truly, being human and allowing yourself to feel things, it is important to be a distinct part of the whole. Everybody's got their things, everybody's got their gifts, or everybody's got a talent that they really have been chasing. I think we're all capable of having all of these gifts. But if you feel supported in one thing, you might chase it a little more and develop it a little bit more, and that makes you a distinct part, but still part of the whole. It's right back to I think it's the,
Exactly.
yeah, I can't remember what culture it is that speaks about, the sea of consciousness is the ocean and we are but a droplet. There's something happens, we leave,
Hmm.
we have our experience as a distinct portion, but you eventually return to the whole, meaning that you're still surrounded by everything. You never really left and you return to it again, but you do have your
Right.
individualistic arc and experience in it. So again, I got a little off the rails there with the whole thing, but I think that is important, that it is a remembering and we're allowed to have these human experiences. We have instincts just like animals do. but we choose to ignore it. My hunter buddies, they used to tell me they weren't all off the rails when it came to all human consciousness, but they'd be like, that animal, it's what you're doing here. You have to be centered and grounded to go do this properly,
Mhm.
because that animal, everyone thinks it's smell. It's not always smell. You can be looking through a scope a long ways away, or you can be walk around the corner and surprise. I live on my acreage. I'll walk around the corner and surprise a badger, and there's an immediate response when their back is to you and they're 50 feet away. They don't smell you. Like, yes, they do have the sense of smell, but there's more going on. There's an energy that I'm emitting that, if I'm scared
Right.
and surprised, it's going to send shockwaves through the air. A good example of that is that waves, in water, we're made mostly of water. If you look at a big body of water and there's waves and there's a buoy out there, or there's a leaf on the water, that leaf is going up and down. The water is not moving. The water is showing you that the energy is there, and it doesn't end when it hits the land. So there's a
Exactly.
lot to be said about how energy goes through the air, how it goes through water, how it is emitted from us. You know, animals, horses have one of the biggest electromagnetic frequencies of any of the mammals in the world around their heart. They're very healing animals. They know, dogs know. They don't speak English, but they know by tone. They know by your mannerism. Your dogs know when you're sad. They know when you're happy, because they are too. So if you could tune into that and utilize that, it doesn't end just with household pets, and this goes back to, again, the garden. When you're in the garden and you're in your happy place and you're doing your things, you can't tell me that that doesn't transfer over to that Roma tomato that you're going to put into your body in a month. And when you're so happy and you watch it grow from a blossom and you bring it, you can't tell me that that's not the best damn meal you've
Yeah,
ever
and
had.
the life that that tomato is gonna have.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that because you've touched on so many different aspects. You've touched on the fact of why I did my reawaken lost senses, workshop, which is, and why I work so much with the senses, because like you said, we as humans, we focus on these five and we think that everything is just limited to these five. But the electromagnetic field that we emit is basically what the woo world calls your aura. We emit it. It's there. It's goes from very small to very big, and others sense it, and we also can sense through it. There are so many senses that we get feelings and understandings from, but because we're not tuned into them, we don't know how to relate to them, we don't know how to name them, and therefore we ignore them. And that's that piece of intuition, where when you really tap into your intuition, what you're tapping into is all these other senses that we have, that all the other beings around us also have, and that's our independent yet interrelated, right? We are distinguished independent beings, and yet at the same time completely interrelated with all of the other beings around us. And I think that that is what it means to be human, because as a human, I'm part of animal, and animals are one world, and the plants are another world, and nature spirits are another world. And it doesn't matter whether you go down bacteria or whether you go down, more etheric type beings. That's not the point. What's most important is those connections, and that we allow ourselves to feel into them and to, kind of work with them and use them, because if not, we're not really being fully human. So I love that you're like talking about remembering what it means to be fully human on every single level. It's such an important message. As we wrap up this conversation, because if not, I feel like we're going to be here for hours, and I'm loving it. I'm all for it. But
Yeah.
I think it's like one of those things. One of the other pieces that I just briefly want to touch on, because I have found this to be the case, where the experience for you and how, like, working with this being, in the case of cybacillin, like, we have them here on the mountains, they grow wild all around. And I because part of our path here in Zamenhof, we don't necessarily ingest any kind of psychoactive plants or other kinds, or fungi in this particular case. And but I have to say that even just like sitting near them on the mountain has its thing. Like, there is stuff going on, even just hanging around. Like I can feel, and I've tapped in some ways. It's been really an interesting experience and part of the experimentation. But I also find it really beautiful that you say, you had this experience, it really opened you, it showed you a path, it did all these things. And now you even work, you help others on their path through hypnotherapy as well as through plant medicine. And yet, I love that you feel like it's such an important thing that people should have the opportunity for. But from what I understand in our conversations, it's not necessarily something that you continuously feel like you need to take, because that's not the point. The relationship with, this being has already been set, and therefore you can tap into it in other ways. And yet you also still want to support the opportunity for others to be able to have this type of experience, because like you can see the benefit of it. Can you just briefly kind of tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do as we wrap things up? Because I really want people to be able to check out, everything that you're offering.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. You are 100% correct. And I will preface like I said, this isn't something that you need to do all the time. It is a wonderful invitation as to what's available to every human on earth if they don't know where to start. And, a lot of the work that we have as individuals, I don't know where to start. I could feel this itch. I'm trying to connect with everything. I don't know what it is. And I want to, but I don't know where to start. And, once you've had this type of experience, you don't need, if you know what's available to it, you can access it whenever you want. Just like you said, you can sit it in an area and be connected. It's out there, and it's available. So we, with our hypnotherapy, ground individuals to go into a journey with a very regulated nervous system. Yeah, if you're like myself, where you've only had one experience and it was not ideal, or if you have no idea what to expect, you want to be able to make sure that you're taking this mile wide journey that's very shallow, because there's going to be colors. There's going to be your conscious mind wanting to guide and wanting to steer you. We want individuals to go in with a very narrowed mindset of, I am going to explore this one thing. I'm going to keep on track, utilizing it as an anchor. So a hypnotherapy session can do that. You can set that anchor. This is my intention, so that when you're in the medicine, you can be like, oh yeah, this is why I'm here. Because we can set it right at the level of the unconscious mind. So that when the medicine comes in your conscious mind is like, this is not safe, I'm out of here. Your unconscious mind comes forward, because its only job is to keep you safe. And then embedded deeply in your unconscious mind is, I am here
Right.
for this. So therefore your heart stays calm, your soul stays calm, and you can explore around into what it is that you're looking for. And then after people can have this breakthrough journey, or this experience, after they come down, we get them back into their body with, lots of nutrition, fruit, and healthy eating. And then about a week later, we like to do another hypnotherapy session where we can bring the unconscious mind forward again and say, what have you been noticing? What has changed, if anything, has your experiencing, or do you want something to change because you're noticing that I'm out of alignment with this, I'm out of alignment with that. Oh, I never even noticed this anymore. What hasn't changed that maybe you want to? And then we can reset that unconscious mind. People want to talk about the default mode network and so on and so forth. Your unconscious mind is yours. If you can bring it forward, and you can basically write your script and say, this is, I may have had a set of beliefs before. They were keeping me safe. They're no longer serving me. They served their purpose. They kept me safe. Or perhaps they were formed in error due to trauma. I'm going to reset those. And this is the way I want to proceed. I want to bring this forward and put it into my conscious waking life of being human. Again, it's not about the escapism. It's about bringing these experiences forward into our conscious life and saying, I want to proceed with this with a regulated nervous system. And this is how I want to operate from here and here forward, because this feels good. I feel connected, I feel healthy, I feel strong, and I want this in my life, not just as an experience, like a holiday that I took somewhere for a week and then I can talk about it. I want this to be carried forward with me. And this is how I want to operate as a person in my conscious experience. So that's what we do.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love the
Yeah.
whole thing. I think that's so fantastic. So it's such a great way. I had another guest on the show who he does a very similar thing, but he does it from the perspective of, he works with the river. So he's an eco psychologist, and he also works with psilocybin, and then I think it's psilocybin. Is that who he works with? Yeah, I think so. And then he works with the river. He takes people river rafting. Of course, obviously, it's a multi-day experience because you can't
Yeah.
take, but it's really interesting because, like you said, it is about, for him, the river is that natural element in addition to the plant medicine to really move you through all of the different pieces that you just mentioned. And I think that that's great. So where do people find you?
They would find me at lifecraft.me. Lifecraft is the name of the clinic that I work through, and we are located in Cochrane, Alberta, in Canada. So Lifecraft is spelled just like it said, and .me. And then that has all the links.
Like,
We do, yeah,
perfect.
we do ancestral eating, non-vaccinated, organic, forest raised meat and organic vegetables and everything. It's a real very holistic. It starts with here. It starts, in here. You take care of everything in here, and you're allowed to
Yep.
explore and see what's available. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. A great connection. Love what you're doing.
Likewise, I loved every single aspect, and I'll make sure that I include all the show notes. Like, in the show notes, I include the link and all the information for people to be able to get in touch with you. Because I'm sure that also for people who maybe can't get, either they can travel to where you are, but also for some people, they might just want somebody who can help them make better decisions on, like, if I am going to have this type of work done, who do I go to? How do I do it? And so I think that the amount of kind of embodied, literally embodied knowledge that you offer is so important. So important. So thank you so much, Layton. This has been a delightful conversation, and I am extremely grateful for it. And I'm just really looking forward to everybody being able to hear this also. So thank you.
Yeah,
And to
thanks.
everyone else out there, these are exactly the types of conversations we want to keep having. So if you liked it, please make sure that you hit the like button, that you subscribe, that you follow, that you comment, that you share it, all those things that make the algorithms really help others find exactly this type of material. And if you want to continue this conversation, the Naturally Conscious community is the place for you, because that is the place where we are having these human and more than human otherkin conversations and really enhancing and co-creating these relationships. So head on over there. Everything you need is in the show notes. And that is it for this week. Remember to resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. Bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. To continue these conversations, join us in the Naturally Conscious community, your premier online ecosystem for plant reawakening and accelerated evolution and co-creation with other kin. Here, you'll find expansive discussions, interactive courses, live events, and supportive group programs like the Plant Wisdom Book Club and the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group. Connect with like-minded individuals collaborating with plants to integrate these insights into life. Intro and outro music by Steve Shuley and Poinsettia from The Singing Life of Plants. That's it for me, Tigria Gardenia, and my plant collaborators. Until next time, remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'm out. Bye.